Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back, everyone, to our concluding lecture in this course on modern financial transactions. Today, the primary goal is to talk about letters of credit and checks/credit cards. We talked about credit cards a little bit before, but I mean, credit card is like just a natural extension from the line of credit. So the problem that this financial instrument seeks to solve is I want to buy, I'm a merchant, I want to buy a lot of things, has a large price tag, large ticket items we call them, but I don't have the money with me. Whether it's gold and silver, I can't carry it, it's too heavy, or the journey is too long and arduous, so I don't want to carry with my banknotes with me, like bags of banknotes. So I have something, just one little piece of paper called a letter of credit that is issued by some type of financial institution that's saying, yes, Tariq is good for $100,000, and we are going to pay the merchant, the bank, or the credit union, or the financial house will pay that $100,000 on my behalf. I'll get my stuff, I'll go back, and then I have to pay the debt there. That's the basic, simple understanding of a letter of credit. And for many centuries, this is actually what kind of gave rise to the banking. So maybe in the order of if we were doing the order of these transactions in historical form, perhaps this should have been, like maybe lesson 2 or 3, because it's like right up there with the rise of the banknote and also the rise of the joint stock company, as a new financial institution. So, and this is something that, you might even laugh at the way I described it, because that's how everything works now. So if I write you a check, I am giving the bank, I'm giving you a promise to pay this amount, and that the bank is the middleman. So in the credit score, or from the letter of credit, there's 3 parties. There's you, the financial institution that's backing you, and then there's the merchant, or the venue, the retailer that you're paying the money to. In a check, the bank is there, but it's really you and the person. The bank is the guarantor, I guess, so maybe it is 3 people. And same thing with the credit card company. Hey, so all of them have three people, unless you take a personal letter of credit from me. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Of course, all of this is permissible with certain conditions. And with that, we'll conclude this course, inshallah. See you for the next clip. Okay, this is one of those classes where the notes are kind of on the thin side. So, I'll do my best to do it justice. So the basic idea, as I was mentioning in the introductory clip, and let me try here to expand on it, is that the letter of credit is a financial instrument that allows me and you to do business together, to transact, but I don't have to carry all the money with me. Now that we have bank wires and transfers and whatnot, it's a little bit different. We don't need them as much, but if you're a large corporation and you're bidding on a project, sometimes you do need a letter of credit from a financial institution to indicate that you are at the financial level to carry it. So it exists in that format, not necessarily in the straight finance. Well, that's not true. It does exist. I'm sorry. It does exist, but it's more of a corporate merchant thing. We don't sort of deal with it on an individual level. We deal with checks. If you're old enough to know how to use a check, I think a lot of people don't know how to write checks anymore. And what we have now is just basically a credit card. But with merchants, especially people that are trading at ports and people that are buying like textiles and raw material in bulk, the letter of credit is an important instrument because it tells the merchant, okay, that this potential buyer has the financial wherewithal, I should take him seriously. If you don't have the letter of credit, then how do I know that your promise is good? I just take you at face value? Well, what if I give you the stuff and then you're a bad person and then you just take the stuff and leave and I'll never get my money back? I'm out of pocket all of this product. So the letter of credit is very important because it's a type of vouching. In Islamic law, we have this idea of wilaya, that anybody that comes into the Muslim body politic, any Muslim citizen can say, oh, this person's with me. And therefore that person is safe. So or like in the science of hadith, I'm just trying to show you that this concept is kind of cuts through all of the Islamic sciences, or like in the science of hadith, where you have two upright people that vouchsafe for another narrator, or that the level of the narrator is dabit, and then he narrates from dabit, so it's sahih, the transmission. So the same kind of idea. This is the letter of credit is the financial institution saying this person is on the level, serious, real, and the money, most importantly, the money that he has or she has is real, and I'm guaranteeing you that money. All of the financial transactions we've been talking about, they only work if there's some type of guarantee, and I've kind of mentioned that to you often, maybe about half of the lectures at least, that none of these will work unless there's a guarantee. If there's no guarantee, then you can be as idealistic as you want, but realistically, from a real life point of view, these transactions will never happen. I mean, I will never accept somebody coming to buy something from me large just by a promise. It has to be backed by some kind of instrument, because just as the urf, that's just the way things are done. It's very nice of you to say those things, and I might, out of the kindness of my heart, hold the product for you, or the property for you, or the whatever, the surplus for you. But if you don't show up with something to back that up, I'm not gonna do it, because I have a moral obligation that with the stuff that Allah Ta'ala has given me, whether it's wealth or product or whatever, to deal, to be equitable with it, because it's a gift from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala at the end of the day. So this is one of those things where you have to kind of be very realistic about it. I mean, the idealistic thing, it's nice to be good and upright, but these financial transactions will not work unless there's a guarantee. So the guarantor here is the financial institution, and this is the main part of the transaction, because it's you, the merchant, and then the guaranteeing financial house. So the financial house is saying, yes, I will back them up. Now, oftentimes, as the person, you seeking the letter of credit, you're going to have to either put something in deposit or put something up in collateral, a rahn, a collateral, and we'll get to that maybe in the next clip, for them to guarantee it. So they're also not going to guarantee you financially just because you're a good guy. They know they've done business with you. You've opened your books to them. Your books are audited, by a third party accounting agency or a third party auditing agency, or maybe they have an in-house auditor. So they look and they see the flow of your monies in and out. So they're like, okay, you remember when we talked about the credit score? This is kind of the same thing. So they say, okay, we can guarantee you or write you a line of credit up to $10,000. So what happens if I go and I buy the stuff and I want to stiff the financial house, other than it being a crime? Well, I would have had to leave something with them, some type of collateral, which they're going to recall in that case. So that's basically what the letter of credit instrument does. And its power is great, because by a simple piece of paper, we facilitate massive amounts of trade, dealing with, it could be hundreds of millions of dollars. Because as I said a couple minutes ago, that usually today, how these things manifest are really with merchants, not like on an individual level. Like, I'm not going to go to the Islamic bookstore and with a line of credit that I can buy, $1,000 worth of books. I mean, I'm just going to pay with my credit card. Now, the credit card also serves like that for us, because you have a credit limit on your credit card, which is your purchasing power. So I want to buy, I go to the Apple store and I want to buy 5 computers for my home or for my office. That's a pretty big purchase, and you're going to be pushing north of 10 grand. Yeah, 8 to 10 grand, let's say. Some phones, iPads, laptops, whatever the case may be. I don't need a line of credit, but when they run my credit card, if it doesn't go through, then they're not. So when I run the credit card through the machine, that's a line of credit. That is, they have approved the sale to me. The money has been given to them by the third party, which is the bank company. Now I have to pay the bank my card back. And we talked about that has to be done by the end of the closing of the next cycle, so you don't accrue interest, because that interest payment would be haram. That kind of interest payment, not riba, but it would be haram because of the debt, unnecessary personal debt that you incur. So it's the same basic idea. There's a wakala, right? There's a wakala transaction in which you've deputized the financial house, credit card company, credit issuing company, insurance company, whatever they have, credit insurance company, they have different names. You have deputized them to pay the person, not only to secure your line of credit, but to front that money to you. So that's a wakala, and then you have to pay back the wakil. You have to pay back that debt. So, whenever this 15th, 16th, 17th century, whenever these type of transactions emerged, it's like a game changer, because I don't have a piece of paper next to me, but you can literally just have a piece of paper in your pocket. You unfold, is my letter of credit, it's stamped, it's sealed, khalas, I'm done, so I'm good for my money. That's it. And that little piece of paper can literally represent an endless amount of money, because the letter of credit could be for many amounts. Now, of course, the credit issuing companies are also rated. That's another thing that we don't necessarily, or not necessarily going to get into, but there's like the platinum level credit company, and then there's like the rinky-dink local credit company that no one's heard of. So obviously, if I want to go in heavy and purchase a lot and be a big trader and man of commerce and industry, I'm going to need the letter of credit from the massive banks. There are banks, as we know, that only belong to countries, like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc., Islamic Development Bank, those type of things. And then there are companies that there are banks or credit companies that only deal with large corporations. And then there are the retail banks that we deal with on a local level. So also in the world of banking and financial institutions, there are many grades. And the guarantees and the level of collateral and all of those would fluctuate, but based on how much money you're trying to secure. But that's the basic idea. And then also there's the check, which it is like this because your check can bounce if you don't have, I can write a check to you for $10 million. I don't have $10 million. And you could take it and be like happy, but then you go to cash it or deposit it and it won't deposit. And then I get fined. But it's like the credit card company more, where there's the wakil, you've authorized the bank to pay. It's deposited from your money because there's a routing number, bank account number, and routing number on the check. So the money is actually taken directly from your account. So there's really no paying the bank back. It's just you have to make sure that you can back that up. Now, in some countries, especially in the Arab world, people write checks in advance, which I still don't understand. That's very foreign to me as a Westerner. But if I buy something for like $1 million, I'm going to give you in all of the checks installments up front, and then you're going to draw down on them every month or every quarter, and then that's also a form of credit. I'll pick that up in the next clip, inshallah. So in the Arab world, in the modern Arab world, that is, people write these checks up front, and that's sort of a way of demonstrating to the other person good faith and credit. I personally don't see how that is a good, there must be an explanation that I'm not seeing, but what's to say that there's on the 5th or 6th check it won't bounce? I just don't, and then the people could go to jail because their checks bounced. So, I would just much rather get a bill, pay the bill or something like that. Anyway, but that's a form of credit so when we talk about checks, because in the notes they talk about shikat, the checks, you have to understand that it's التردد الذهني, what it means mentally in the Arab context is very different than when I say a check from the Western context. Okay. So here I'm supposed to actually just elaborate on the things that I already elaborated on, so that's not going to help us out too much. Let me just see if there's anything worth mentioning to you before we move on to something else. Well, why did I do this? I already explained all of that. Let me jump to the last portion, and then maybe in the next clip we can just round out the whole course, rather than talk. There's really not much more to say about this stuff, other than to get into the Sharia opinions of it. Of course, one of the major verses from an Adillah point of view of these type of transactions is 282 in Al-Baqarah, the longest verse in the Quran, Surah Ad-Dayn, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha tadayantum ila ajalin musamman faktubu. If you're going to transact something and there's going to be a time to that transaction, write it down. So the letter of credit is a way of kind of fulfilling that obligation that something is written, that there are guarantees, that the rights are protected, so on and so forth. I want to get you to the madhab issue. Yeah, here it is. The Hanafis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanbalis do not allow collateral on a debt. But the Malikis and some of the Shafi'is do. So obviously for this to work, we have to take the Maliki and that position within the Shafi'i method that allows that, because when you're going to go to the financial house and you're asking for like a line of credit or a letter of credit for $1 million, we got to put down some collateral. I mean, there's no, why would they give you that if they don't put down a collateral? So obviously that's one of those positions where clearly we have to take one position over another position. In general, these type of transactions exist, are considered legitimate legally and from the Islamic legal point of view. They exist in most markets that I know of, and the details. So he says the Jeddah Mufti Council, the Jeddah Fiqh Council, 1992, codified this. So unfortunately, as you see, sometimes in the classes I've been telling you guys, like the Fiqh Council in Kuwait that met on this year, that year, you see a lot of the dates are like from the 80s and 90s. That's too old. That's too old. You have to either I mean, I don't know because I didn't put together the subject matter notes. There are many fatwas and fatwa bodies that are super active today. So I mean, quoting something in the year 2024 from 1992, that's from this point of view, we're talking about modern transactions, that's too old. So, astaghfirullah, I don't care what they talked about in the 90s. What do they talk about in the last 5 years? I mean, certainly they must have, these questions emerge or there's nuances and things like that. Anyway, that's just a little bit of an aside when you're doing research. We have a class in the future that will talk about research, so maybe we can pick up some of those points there. Anyway, so all of this is considered legitimate because it's a type of wakala. The wakala transaction is very important from the classical fiqh, because if you've noticed, many of the modern transactions, I have told you, it's like a wakala. It's a form of wakala. And that's why the correct way to approach these transactions, again, as I said before, just to repeat, to avoid slipping into the emotion of it and misunderstanding words, is to understand the modern transaction on its own terms, irrespective of the words, because unfortunately people call things wrong things all the time. And as a Sharia student, you know from our study of mantiq, our study of fiqh, that the definition of something has to be jama' mana. It has to bring in all of the particulars of that subject, of that word, and it has to repulse everything that's not related to it. So when I say door, then you understand what a door is. It could be a car door, a house door, a barn door, a store door, a door of the mosque. They're all a door. So what is a door? It's a passageway that can be closed, that can be open. I mean, there's got to be, door to a bedroom, door to a bathroom, door in a plane. There's got to be a definition to it. So a window and the things that, the hole in the wall is not going to be the definition of the door, because the hole in the wall means a window and a door. So it has to be jama', it has to bring in the things that belong to it and exclude it. Unfortunately, most people don't study logic. Most Muslims don't study logic. Most non-Muslims don't study logic anymore. So a lot of their verbiage is sloppy. So you have to opine, you have to conceptualize the modern transaction irrespective of its words, because you have to be able to rise to the level of being able to critique, then this is not a loan, this is finance, or can this be called something else? Not all the time, but sometimes. And then you have to recall the micro transactions. I call them micro transactions in the fiqh, the section of buyu' and mu'amalat. And then you have to see what are the points of conjunction. Now, there will be some points of conjunction, and then there are many things in the modern world that are simply new. I mean, the last 2 lectures we talked about al-ushur. I mean, that's even new from our history, because it was something that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu enacted. Then you say, okay, what is this new thing? What are the principles of the new thing? Do they match or go against the principles of the Sharia? And that's how you would say, okay, this is halal, or this is not halal, or it can be halal if we change 1, 2, 3. And sometimes that's the case. Like, why are you calling it a loan? Call it a finance. As I've mentioned to you before, many of the Muslim, in Egypt, the last several years, that's what they've done. They've changed the names of these retail banking terms from al-qard, from al-qurud, from a loan, to a tamwil, finance, because the Sharia dictated that to have a clear idea. Okay, anyway, so these are considered permissible. So the main things we're talking about here are the letter of credit, which a credit issuing body or financial house gives. It could be an individual, but mostly when I say letter of credit, it's usually going to be a company. So the company goes to, I want to go to China, it's a new market, and I need to go with something. Just to have these initial meetings, I have to show my counterpart, my Chinese counterparts in this example, that my company is able to purchase between $10 and $15 million worth of stuff. So that gives them some kind of comfort. Okay, this is a serious buyer, and we can hook him up with these type of people in this space. Not the lower people, and certainly not the higher people. On an individual level, the letter of credit is sort of the check. And the check is either, the checks that I'm familiar with, they have your actual bank account and routing number on the check. So when you give it to the person and that person goes to the bank and they process it, that money is directly taken from your account. It is a wakala, but it's also a kind of a certificate of trust that I wrote you a check from my bank. You recognize the bank name. It's a well-known bank. Then you trust that I'm going to pay that. I'm good for the money. Or, like I said, in some parts of the Arab world or the Muslim world, they write checks in advance when they're purchasing large ticket items, and then the other person just keeps drawing down on the check every month or every quarter, for example. And then there's a credit card, which is probably what, we've talked about a little bit before, but it brings itself up here because it also makes sense. That the credit card is literally extending you a line of credit, and it's buying on your behalf those items. I gave you the example of walking to the Apple store and buying, maybe $8,000, $10,000 worth of equipment. That's a lot of money. They go to the checkout, they're going to run your card. If your card is rejected, they're not going to give you the stuff. If the card is accepted, what that means is that in that moment, the credit card company has extended you a line of credit, will then pay the merchant, and then you will get a bill from the credit card company because it's your wakil that you have to pay back. So it is a credit because it's not like the money instantaneously is paid to the merchant. Sometimes it takes some time. Those are the main things about this that I wanted to talk about, and perhaps because we still have one more clip, maybe I can give you some sort of parting advice about modern transactions, because maybe you either like this particular course or you didn't like it at all, and I want to leave you with some advice. So I'll see you back here for the next and final clip, inshallah. Okay, parting advice from Tariq on modern financial transactions. Because I was trained at Al-Azhar and Dar al-Ifta in Egypt, I was, I had a front row seat to literally thousands of fatwas being asked and answered every month. And in that process, simply because of the volume, of fatwa, and Egypt's a very populated country, so the volume of muftis that I interacted, there was one grand mufti, but then there are all of these junior muftis, dozens of them in Dar al-Ifta. And because I got a front row seat, I do have some particular perspectives on the issue of modern finance. Part of it is my bias, as you can tell throughout the courses. I have my own bias. I look at Islamic banking as an industry with a little bit of hesitation, because a lot of it is unnecessary, from my point of view, terminology, and playing around with conventional transactions that I think are fine. At the same time, I am very much a proponent of us creating our own things. So, if there's an Islamic bank or a conventional bank, I probably would want to go to the Islamic bank just because I feel like, okay, we're helping our own, we're doing our own, we're creating our own, our own space, not because I feel that the other one is not Islamic. That's I guess what I'm trying to say, which is a kind of like an academic position. But I'm definitely for us creating our own industries, our own platforms, helping our own. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'min al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'ifu fi kullin khayr." The Prophet ﷺ said, the strong Muslim is better and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak Muslim, even though in both of them is goodness, because the strong Muslim can help themselves and others. So we need to be a strong community. I'm all for that. So that's a great thing. So I don't want you to take my criticisms along the way as saying that the Islamic banking system is haram. Astaghfirullah, I'm not saying that. It's completely legitimate. I'm just saying that from an academic point of view, from a scholarly point of view, they probably should, they would be better served creating new instruments, or rather than just taking the conventional stuff and changing the names. Sometimes the change of the name is important, I understand. But I think it would be better like the joint stock company and like the letter of credit and all of these things, that the banknote, that were invented primarily from Europe. Why don't we invent our own instruments of financial instruments? It's a form of ijtihad. I'm much more interested in that. Anyway, the course is important because one simple fact. If you look at the traditional books of fiqh, like we're teaching, from the Shafi'i madhab, the Hashiyah of Ibn of al-Bayjuri, rahimahullah, the Iqna' of al-Sharbini, al-Khatib al-Sharbini, rahimahullah, talk about Nawawi and al-Rafi'i, Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, Ibn Hajar, al-Haytami, al-Ramli, radiyallahu anhum ajmain. All of these great luminaries, their economic system was completely different than the economic system that we live in. That's just a fact. The economy of the fiqh books is not the economy of today. The currency of the fiqh book is not the currency of today. Even the names of the transactions of the fiqh book are not the names of the transactions today. So this course is fundamental. I mean, as a matter of fact, we could probably create a whole year's worth of courses just about this topic, how Islam is applied in the modern world, in our world today. Because we don't want to just learn the theory of Islam, we want to learn how to apply Islam and the Sharia and the Quran and Sunnah given our context. So it's one thing to know the primary sources and understand them correctly, and then there's another thing to learn about our modern condition, and then how do we apply the unchangeable first principles of the Quran and Sunnah to the here and now, which is constantly changing. That's a very complicated thing that takes a lot of practice, and you have to develop a sense for it. They call it faqihun nafs. You have to have this intrinsic sense of understanding the two and how to link them. So that's why this is important. I would say the same thing if we were talking about modern political theory, or if we were talking about a modern economic theory, or if we were talking about statecraft, or we were talking about sports and entertainment, or talking about healthcare, or whatever the case may be, food engineering, genetically modified food, all of the stuff that occupy the here and now. We could have a course just on it by linking the two together. So this course is an important one, and I hope, inshallah, ask Allah Ta'ala that I did justice by it and conveyed you the information correctly. But it's important because you need to start to think like this, because what we're doing in this course, that's what you need to be doing after you graduate. You need to be thinking about these things all the time. How do I take the theory of what I learned and apply it? Well, the first thing is you don't do that. You have to understand the theory, make sure that you've mastered that. That's what these 4 years are about. Then you have to spend the same amount of time knowing the here and now, like we've tried to unpack these transactions. I think at one point I told you about the loan, the bonds, when we talk about bonds. And I said, my critique of the Islamic banking industry's opinion is they're assuming that the project that the municipality is doing isn't going to make any money. So that forces them to think, oh, it's a loan in which there's extra. It's not a loan. You're financing this project that is a profit-generating project. How do I know that? Well, then the whole municipality, all governments would collapse if every project they didn't bring any money. They would constantly be on, and that's why some states fail. So that tasawwur, that conceptualization that I have is just natural because I grew up in the West. I understand that that's what a bond is, and when a municipality, a state, or in my case, America, county or state does a project, you understand. I've been educated since I was young to understand what these things are. So you have to make the big effort to understand the here and now on its own terms, and you also have to be brave enough to critique what they're called. Why is it called a bond? Why is it called a letter of credit? Why is it called interest? Why isn't it called usury? What is usury? Go to the Oxford English Dictionary. Look at it. Look at the Bible, the King James Bible. How is usury, the word usury first brought in the English language? What are the commentaries? You have to think like that. You have to hustle and do that effort to understand it at its own term, irrespective of your emotional and your instinct, halal or haram, gut reaction. If you've done that and you've done the studies, now you can try to bring them together. And your bias is to make things work, not to make things haram. say, okay, is there something in this modern transaction that looks like what we have in those microtransactions of the Sharia? Yes or no? What's the nature of money? What's the nature of the transaction? Well, what's the relationship with the bank? What's the idea of a credit card? Why is this called interest and not usury, for example? Why isn't it called here's your usury payment? Well, what's the difference between interest and usury? That word keeps coming up again and again. Why do they? And then there's the problem of translation, because most of these modern transactions are European or Western inventions that have been translated into the Arabic language, and not every translation is correct. Reverse translation, that is. So, fawaid al-banuk, the faida, because it's extra, people will, is that the right translation or not? What is the difference between faida and riba? What is the definition of riba? Etc., etc., etc. So we did a little bit of that, or medium bit, a bit of that in this course with all of these microtransactions to understand. The other thing you need to know is that, sort of as parting advice, is that the world is changing faster than it was yesterday. So tomorrow will change more than it is today and yesterday. And probably that will continue. So this can oftentimes seem to be an overwhelming task. And that's why you need to be with a group of people. You need to be with a group of scholars, or an institution like the university, or a group of muftis or something like that. You can't just rely on your own self. You got to read about what other people are doing and saying, and then that way you can leverage their experience, and you can expedite the time, which is super, super important. So one of the benefits of studying with mashayikh is that you just benefit from everything that they've learned. So they're saving you all the hassle of having to do it from scratch. So you don't have to do it from scratch. No one can do it from scratch. Don't think that you're doing it from scratch, and work with the community when you can. Let's see what else I want to say with parting advice. Oh, the other thing is that a lot of these modern transactions require us to think beyond our own madhab, and require us to think beyond what is the dominant opinion. And that's something that you also have to be comfortable with, because the theory of fiqh is one thing, in which case we follow the mu'tamid, and this is the right answer. Like when I ask you questions, those are the right answers. And then applying the fiqh is something different. So when we come to apply it in a real case scenario, we're not going to be beholden neither to our madhab, neither to the dominant position, because we are looking for solutions to people's lives. Is there guidance in the Quran and Sunnah? Is there guidance from the mujtahids of the past and the opinions of the past that allow and facilitate life to make it easy for people? That's the goal. And that's how, by doing that, you are following the Quran and Sunnah. So that's another thing, a theme that's come up often. I hope you enjoyed the class. We'll leave it there, and I'll see you next time, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Today's class, alhamdulillah, in which we conclude this course, is a brief look at letters of credit. And letters of credit are, it's an old new instrument. I mean, it's new in the world, but it's old, like it's several hundred years old. And it's a way for merchants and companies to be able to transact large amounts of money without having to carry large amounts of money, because they have a letter of credit that's backed by some type of credit union, bank, financial house, insurance credit company, whatever, that promises the merchant that, yeah, this person is good for this money and we're going to pay you that money. And then when I go back, I have to settle the bill, or I've left collateral that they can take for that. Even though theoretically this could happen on an individual level, the sort of letter of credit is much more like a business type of instrument. On an individual level, we usually have checks. And we talked about the check being a type of wakala, transaction in which you are giving permission to the bank to pay the merchant the amount that's on the check, and then the amount is withdrawn from your money. And then more commonly, because even checks now are becoming rare, more commonly we have credit cards. So when you buy something with a credit card, that is exactly what the letter of credit is. The credit card company has extended you a line of credit. You go to purchase it. If the charge goes through, that means that the credit card company is promising the merchant to pay that amount, because the money is not transacted right away. It might take a couple days for the merchant to receive the money, and then you get a bill from the credit card company that you have to pay from your cash at the end of the billing cycle, usually a month, sometimes a little bit more. And so I mean, those are the three major type of transactions we talked about, the permissibility of them, and taking the position of the Malikis and some of the Shafi'is that you can leave collateral with the debt. And then in the sort of last clip, I gave you just some parting advice about the importance of modern transactions, how to go about thinking about them, and indeed how to go about thinking about other modern things and applying your Sharia knowledge to them. And I hope that that was of benefit to you. And I hope you enjoyed the class. I hope I did justice by the subject matter. And see if there's anything else I wanted to say. It just requires a little bit of mental flexibility, I think, is the last parting advice. So remember the importance of that, holding to your principles, but by being flexible at the same time. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.